Big Steve, back at it again today. And I had somebody tell me about this video with the Diablo 4 devs at Gamescom 2023 with Rod Ferguson and Chris Wilson. I heard some bad things about this, so I'm decided to watch it, and I'll give you my take on it. Right now, I have a negative view towards Diablo 4. It's not what I expected the game to be, nor are they fixing it at the capacity they should be fixing the game. So we're going to see what they have to say, and we'll go from there. Oh man, let's dive in.
I'm Chris Wilson, production director over the live service for Diablo 4.
And I'm Rod Ferguson, general manager of all things Diablo.
So season 2 is going to be launching on October 17th, and it's called The Season of Blood. We're really excited because this is going to be a new vampire threat is essentially invading Sanctuary.
Now, if you heard him, he said essentially. The reason why he said that is because they're just taking old mobs and reskinning them. Essentially, there's a threat. Right?
And so there's going to be a new quest line. So the player will be partnering with the new character named Eris, who's being voiced by Gemma Chan. So we're super excited to have her join.
Don't care.
Our really, a great ensemble of voice talent. And she thinks she's going to be a great fit.
These are the type of things that are ruining the game.
The character's going to gain access to new vampiric powers that you'll be able to use across all of the different classes to take out the new vampire threat that's invaded Sanctuary. So we'll have new legendary items and weapons.
The reason why I hate seasonal themes so much is because, as in like season 1, The Malignant Heart, they're adding stuff and they're taking it away. I was never a big fan of seasonal themes just because of that. It's like a lot of work wasted towards something that didn't need to be done, or when it could be spent more towards the core game mechanics. They still haven't got the game figured out, and they're doing seasonal themes. Like, I could see if they started doing this at like season 5 or something. It's too early to be doing this stuff.
New uniques, and it's really going to provide a whole new way to kind of like progress with your character and a new power fantasy.
Yeah, and then that's sort of the theme and story side of it, and then obviously with each season, as part of a live service, we want to do quality of life and make changes to the game sort of in the end game as well. And so one example of that is in season 2, we're introducing 5 new additional bosses. Because we look at, what is the progress you make from level, say, 50 to 100. And we wanted to have more milestones along the way where you can be like, I can test my build against these certain types of bosses. And we also know there's a huge desire for our uniques and the uber uniques, because they have a very low drop rate, and sometimes they really solidify your build.
It's a good thing they're adding new bosses. I can guarantee you they're going to be bringing back some old bosses. Hopefully they bring back Andariel or Duriel. At least one of them would be fine. I just hope they don't make it like the Uber Lilith fights, where there's a bunch of one-shot mechanics and all the same spells have the same color. You can't even see what's going on the ground. Hopefully they design fights better. I've said this before. I wish the fights had more mechanics to them, and not just like one-shot mechanics, things you might have to do in between, like more strategic. And I always refer back to Lost Ark for this, because I think Lost Ark overall did a great job with a lot of their boss fights.
And so now with these 5 new bosses, you can actually target uniques, and you can go and have a much higher drop rate on an Uber unique than you would in the open world.
Those 5 bosses, obviously it's interesting because the way people approach this kind of stuff now is they're very invested. So like at the same time as being excited, there's a level of cynicism towards everything that is coming out. So I saw the 5 bosses, excitement, and then immediately people were like, are they just going to be reskins of a boss that we know 5 times? So can you talk about like what those 5 bosses will actually entail?
It's a mixture of sort of like new and sort of, one of the things we heard a lot from players was like, I don't think we've ever even talked much about it, where the bosses are coming from, but there's a notion of like, I play these campaign bosses and I didn't necessarily get to fight them ever again unless I'm playing the campaign. So that's part of the inspiration. So there's going to be definitely like ways we can leverage content we've had, but also new content as well. And so that, but the fact that we're doing it in the seasonal and the eternal is going to be really exciting. And again, that idea of like, we've heard a lot of feedback around the Uber unique. So And what's really interesting is that actually it's a boss ladder, so it's not like in Diablo 2 where you would just go farm a boss over and over and over and over again. There's actually sort of prerequisites to be able to summon a boss that you'll have to go through the bosses to get there.
Which is okay.
And so it actually has its own.
It goes out into the world. When do you start to pick up on the general sentiment from the audience? What is it data points? Is it social media? How do you know what the sentiment is?
So with live service development, I mean, we're always paying attention to the community. So we're looking at all sources of feedback. We solicit surveys to some of our players. So we use that as one kind of funnel for information. We look at
surveys. Okay. And there's a lot of different players out there. And a lot of their ideas are not good. I'm not saying my ideas. I wouldn't be able to tell you how to make the game. But asking random certain people and getting bad feedback back could be one wrong route to go, because if you're getting bad feedback and you're working off that, you're gonna institute bad ideas.
Telemetry and data that's like coming back from like the back end, so we kind of see like where there are pain points or friction from just looking at data.
So looking at data, one thing I hate about data, it is a good thing to work off, but it cannot be your only thing. If you're just working off data, it's like with their things to keep you in the game longer, that's a data point. That's why they kept you in the game longer doing certain things, so they could use it as a data point. So if you're just working off data points, I don't have much hope for Diablo 4. If I heard them say, well, we're playing other ARPGs, we're seeing how they've done their fights, we're trying to implement some cool things. And another thing about Diablo 4 is they just made a base ARPG. They did not innovate nothing, so there's nothing cool and great about the game, which makes the game actually lackluster.
But then also we're paying attention to forums. When we do a blog post or release patch notes, we're trying to look at like what is the response, what are things that are coming back from the community. And we use that to kind of help inform some of the decision points for the future. And so what's great with the live service is like between seasons, patches, hot fixes, there's numerous kind of vehicles for us to kind of like inject change and evolve the game for the future. And it's always in pursuit of making the best possible experience for the players.
It's one of the big challenges is really around the idea of the vocal minority. Like sometimes a very small group can be very loud, and that's why we use things like surveys. Like, because you're always managing sort of the qualitative information you get where people's just opinions, and then the quantitative information you have, which is the actual data that shows what's actually happening. And it's in a game where it's...
Back to the data. They're always talking about data. To me, this is a red flag. Like I said, if they had other ways other than data, their surveys is data. Everything they do has to do with data.
Sort of built on a power fantasy. Like, everybody loves candy, right? And so but you can't have candy all the time. And so that's one of the hard parts about managing, is that sometimes there's a little bit of medicine and you need some sugar to go with it, right? And so as we're looking at our feedback and we're looking at what we need to do to balance the world, because we want every build to be playable and we want every build to be viable. And so sometimes...
This has got to be a joke. First of all, I'm going to say there's not enough skills in the game. I played Necromancer all the way. It's the only class I played. Now, I've heard from other people that Sorceress, like Oishard Sorceress, was like one of the only viable builds. And same with Necromancer. Bone Spear was king. Now, Mini Necro is pretty good. But what I'm going to say is, as a Necromancer, every build used at least 2 or 3 of the same skills. So you had your Blood Mist, you had your Corpse Tendrils, and I think it was Decrepify. Those 3 skills were on every build. So there's not enough diversity. Every build kind of seems the same. There might be 1 or 2 skills different. And there was some builds lackluster, like Blood. It was just not even in the ballpark.
Sometimes you have to sort of manage that across all the different classes and all the different builds, and sometimes you need a little medicine. And I think one of the things as we look at Season 1, we want to really show that we're being responsive and reactive and being agile, but we sort of got 2/3 of the way there, and we had a lot of the medicine, but we didn't have the sugar yet. And so, but to be able to act quickly, we sort of said, well, that's good, we've got the fix, but when we didn't bring and here's the other fun part that makes that balance work. And so I think that's part of the criticism of Season 1, is that we did the medicine, didn't quite yet do the sugar, and then we've been doing the sugar as we go now. And it was something our game director talked about in one of the live streams, is that moving forward, anytime we have to do any sort of significant balance, we'll always have that other side of it, like, because it's really about, we're making the game for player joy. We're making the game the best game we can for players. And so, but sometimes they have to have a salad. They can't have ice cream for dinner every night, and so you just have to kind of balance your messaging, manage expectations, communicate more openly. And I think we're doing that now as we go into season 2.
You mentioned it earlier, but how do you account for the vocal minority in a way that feels like you're speaking to them, but also not balancing that with the realistic kind of achievements that you can do? Because it's obviously like Diablo 4 comes out, everyone's super positive, and everyone is like really up on it, and the vast majority of people are enjoying it. But then the conversation quickly turns into like, this is missing, that is missing. But that conversation is very much defined and
that's exactly what happened. Everybody was enjoying the game because it was new. When the newness wears off and people start seeing the holes, it starts to fall apart. That's why a lot of people always say, if you make a good game, people will play it.
Pushed by a group of people that are at level 100 or 80, and they're the only people that are like really vocal. Right. So it can seem like when people are looking at it, oh, this is a really pervasive issue, and it's actually just a small group of people. How do you like approach that? And
it's not
is
a
there
small
anything
group.
that you do to try and tell your own team, like, hey, I know it looks like this, but we have to think about everyone? And
I gotta say, this guy has good questions. They're just a little off sometimes.
And how do you message that out as well?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think the quantitative data really helps there, so you can actually see what's happening with the game, and you can go like, oh, this
back to data points again.
Might be an issue for people who are level 100, and this is the percentage of people who have actually gotten there so far, and we can sort of look at how big of an issue that actually is. But I mean, I don't want to say vocal minority to be dismissive, because sometimes that vocal minority are also your influencers and the people who are, the tastemakers who will be like, hey, this is how we feel about it, and you want to take that in as well. And that's why it's always is a balance between knowing what are we hearing and what are we seeing in the game and what are we feeling when we play. And I think that notion of like, hey, one of the things we were excited about with D4 is that as a mainline game, no other Diablo game actually had any end game at all. Like when the campaign rolled credits, you were done. And so we were really happy with D4 to have Helltide and Nightmare Dungeons and the Tree of Whispers and PvP. And so we felt like this was a great starting place.
I gotta say, they kind of took Helltides from Diablo 2 Terror Zones. It's not much different. Yeah, it is a little different, but it's pretty well the same concept. And Diablo 2 did have an end game. Like every game is gonna have its point where you kind of get bored of it, but at least in Diablo 2, you keep grinding and grinding until you didn't want to grind no more. This is a hack and slash game. You just like to log on and kill stuff and get good loot. The problem with Diablo 4 is you log online, you kill stuff, and you don't get nothing new anymore.
And so when we talked, even if you go back to our interviews,
like nothing to work towards, nothing to get rich. Like I always said back in Diablo 2, the reason why I still play it today is because sometimes when the season starts, I like to just get rich. My character could have been done a long time ago. First weekend, I'm just farming and getting rich, getting cool items and stuff.
Launch, we would talk about this is the beginning and not the ending of Diablo. This is a foundation we're building upon, and you're seeing that like in season 2 with these 5 additional bosses. In season 3, we're going to be bringing in leaderboards. Like those are.
Okay, I'm back. Had a quick phone call to take. Let's continue.
This is an evolution of a game over time, and so the notion that you can kind of grind your way to 100.
Okay, so what he was saying is they need the time to make the game. Unfortunately, a lot of games nowadays is it's like don't judge a book by its cover, but that's what people do. They kind of had their shot. People even gave them till season 1. And I think some people are going to give them till season 2, but I don't think season 2 is going to cut it. There isn't enough there, I don't think. So I don't have much hope for them. I wanted Diablo to be so good. I wanted to be the new game, but personally, I don't think it's it. But who knows? That may change in time, and I want to be proven wrong. I'm a Diablo fan since a young boy. I played Diablo 1 and Diablo 2. I played the shit out of them. I wasn't a fan of Diablo 3. I wasn't a fan of Diablo Immortal, which is the way these games are going. So, like I said to some people, I just don't think these games are made for me anymore. And I've come to terms with that, and I've kind of accepted that. But I had hope.
100 and go like, what the heck? Where's everything I was expecting? Like, all that stuff is being layered in over time as we go, and we're continuing to make the game, better and better. So it really is just sort of like, definitely take in what you hear, but also, trust but verify, go and see what the data is telling you as well.
In addition to that, I think the other important piece of this is transparency, right? So we're really trying to create and be open with our community about setting expectations. Like, here's what we're trying to do in the near future, releasing patch notes early, really just having live streams, the campfire chats, letting our audience know, like, here's what we're trying to do in the short term.
Which are good ideas.
Here are things we want to even do in the medium term, like he mentioned leaderboards for season 3. Like, we're trying to just be more open about that information versus like holding everything to the vest.
And Joe in our last, he talked about philosophy. Like, here's why we're doing certain things. Because I think it's one thing to say what you're doing, another thing to say why you're doing it. And so I think helping people understand, like, oh, this is our goal, this is what we're trying to accomplish, and just give some background to why these decisions are being made.
Explore the 1931
Premium, where are you?
Discover that it's because of your grandmother's perseverance.
You guys have been quite candid with, the patch came out and it nerfed some stuff, and you're like,
Yeah,
okay, we did it wrong, we won't do that again. And then you talked about all the vehicles you have to kind of approach it. How do you feel about the expectation that creates? Because it's kind of a double-edged sword, right? Where you're like, oh, we can like react, but then the expectation from the audience is when they demand something, they need it immediately. And they're like, why do you put it? How do you guys as developers feel about that? And how do you try and
I would say it's very frustrating.
It is a balancing act, depending on what it is we're trying to address. I mean, it can obviously take development time to get it right? You don't want to be too hasty to just rush, change. You may end up like imbalancing the game in a different way that you maybe didn't foresee.
Sure.
So you have to take your time to really think through, like, okay, how do we want to address the problem that's been flagged? Look at it in terms of priority as well. There's oftentimes competing priorities. So it's like making sure you're targeting the thing that's going to have the biggest impact for the player first and foremost, and then finding the right time to release those things. And so it's just really a balancing act that our leadership and our designers have to really kind of like work through for each issue as it comes through.
Yeah, it's also complexity of the development process. When we look at, we have essentially 3 teams working on the seasonal side. We have our odd teams, so like doing season 1, then season 3, then season 5. We have our even teams doing season 2, season 4, and then we have another team that's focused on what's going on in the live game. And so on top of those 3 teams, who are like, the odds and evens are leapfrogging each other. We've got our live team, and then we actually have an expansion team working as well. And so when
I don't like how they work so far ahead. Like I said, it's good to be ahead of the game, but they're going to run into a lot of trouble with things they can't fix because of this problem, because of what people are working on in future seasons. Or I think, I was watching the Path of Exile's Chris Wilson, and they said they don't even know what they're doing for the next season. They haven't even got the idea yet, which is great because they're more focused on what they have right now. Diablo is getting too far ahead of the curve.
we hear a piece of feedback, there's always a conversation. If we agree with it, then it's like, is this a short term? Hey, we can do that as a hot fix overnight. Is this more of a patch that has to come in 2 weeks? Or actually it's something we're going to address next season because of the way that, we're a lot of the ways, that's part of the thing. Like when we put out season one was finished when we released. And so there was no real player feedback yet, other than sort of the beta feedback. But after launch, like season one was kind of done. And so that's why we used that preseason time to tweak as much as we could, and why we, removed the need for the altars of Lilith and that kind of thing. So it's just that notion that like the trains are always running, right?
Yeah, they act like they done you guys a favor. We removed the altars of Lilith. Their plan from day one was you have to go do them every season. And you know why? To keep you in the game longer as a data point. This all comes back to data points. And this is why I'm so turned away from Blizzard itself. It's what it's turned into. It's all about data points.
The trains are always leaving the station, and what can get on which train is always part of the balancing act of like, oh yeah, we agree with that feedback. Now which train can we actually make it on? And are we willing to delay other things to make that happen? Because I think sometimes people just feel like it's always additive, and really it's kind of like there's only so much scope that a team can do. And so to say like, oh, this new idea wants to come in, well then that means usually another idea needs to get postponed. And so when we're talking about the prioritization, it's like, oh, we want to do this. Are we willing to slow down this other thing? And so that's definitely one of the things, the give and takes you have to do when you're balancing.
I don't want to say misunderstanding, but a lot of the kind of discussion is also attributed to things like the battle pass system and the season model as well.
Who cares about the battle pass? It does not affect anybody.
In Diablo, and we've had other people make games similarly, like the Path of Exile, keep looking at and being like, we're learning a lot from the viability of something like a battle pass model. How often do you kind of like reassess that, and do you think it does still work in this day and age? Especially because it's like a lot of cosmetic stuff, and you don't want to upset the balance. And when it is like you can't put a lot of meaningfully changing content in there, is it even worth doing? How do you approach like looking at that kind of system?
I think that's what we're learning now. Like, that's one of the things is like we're having lots of conversation about the first time we've done something, and so in times we'll come together and we'll go like, hey everybody, this is one data point, and we're looking at season 1 and like, what's the battle pass doing? What's the shop doing? What is the seasonal reset doing? How do we feel about it? And it's like, at the end of the day, it's one data point. And so I'm really excited for season 2 on October 17th, because that's now we'll have 2 data points to go like, okay, how many people are playing? How many people are engaging with battle pass and shop? How's it all working? And so I think this is all learning for us. Like, I know people tend to think like, oh, you had 10 years with Diablo 3, you must know everything. And the answer is very different games, very different teams.
True.
And so and obviously
right.
The industry's changed in the last 10 years. So for us, this is a lot of learning for us. So we're going to, make some mistakes as we're trying to make the game better and better.
Yeah. Do you think there's kind of like a different expectation on a team like the Diablo team, or even a developer like Blizzard? Yeah, because obviously
100%.
you're seen as one of the biggest developers in the world, but the thing that you're
seen as
introducing is still quite new to you. There's the expectation, well, this is Blizzard. They shouldn't be allowed to stumble or able to stumble. They should know this stuff. Like,
not for the price of the game. I'm from Canada. The game cost me $140. I expected something better.
How do you kind of like approach that sentiment, knowing that there's no like pushing back against it?
I think it's just like we're all kind of just working our way through it. It's like sure, we have a lot of benefits of being part of Blizzard, and we had a lot of learnings, and we were able to talk to each other and understand what's going on in WoW and what's going on in Overwatch, and we can talk to each other. But at the end of the day, this team is like doing a live service like this is new for this team. And even we have some D3 veterans and things, but a lot of our team, like, there's a good part of our team where Diablo 4, we were at the launch party where I was like, how many people, this is your first game ever? And like a bunch of hands go up, and you're like, this is the very...
Oh, shit. A bunch of people? And they sold this to us for $140? Some people paid more. The highest edition was like $160 or $170. And they got a pile of new people? Yeah, we expected better from Blizzard. That's kind of bullshit if you ask me.
The first game they've ever shipped is Diablo 4, and so there's definitely like the combination of experience and the ability to access Blizzard, but like we're still going to learn as we go. And so yeah, I think I get the, hey, you're Blizzard, you should never make a mistake, but at the same time, like, again, the industry is always changing, the games are always changing, the players are always changing, so it's just going to be learning as we go. And that's why what I love about a live service is we can evolve over time. It's not a fixed state. And so that with each season, and we're going to support the game for years to come, is that we can evolve and learn as we go.
I think what's fascinating about that is because we have a studio like you guys where we very much are like figuring it out as you go along to a degree, and it's kind of like the expectation is, why are you doing this? You should have the perfect product each time. And it's not thought of as great. But then on the flip side, you have a thing like Larian, which just put out one of the best RPGs in a long time, but it was developed over 3 years of iterating, very publicly forward-facing, and people are celebrating that right now. It must be kind of wild to be in an industry where you can have two contradicting kind of like narratives on the same thing going, and like, how do you deal with it on a day-to-day basis as developers?
They all have that. I mean, I'm just really happy that this feels like the year of the RPG, and like a Starfield and Final Fantasy and Hogwarts, and all the stuff that's going on. So I'm just excited to be part of that. And I think they each have their own place when you think about like the turn-based versus the hack and slash versus, the third person versus isometric. Like, I think it's really cool that the RPGs can have such a diversity. And so, I don't know, I just think it's great that RPGs is really coming to the top this year.
Hell yeah, brother. Well, that was it. That interview does not give me hope. As you can see my take on it and see where I'm coming from. Now, who knows? Maybe in the future, Diablo could turn out to be a really good game like I wanted it to be. But like they said, you're going to make mistakes along the way, which is okay, which is going to happen with anybody. But the unfortunate part about this is that they made too many too early. I still have hope for Blizzard. I might check out Season 2. I'm still debating that. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, guys. Hit the subscribe, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Peace.